Hi, I'm Mark Small. I'm an Indianapolis attorney, and you are watching Civil Discourse Now. We're coming to you from Indianapolis, Indiana, on the north side, an area of Indianapolis called Broad Ripple. My co-host is Paul Ogden.
Thank you, Mark.
And we have several guests today. We film in 14-minute segments. We're at Big Hat Books, 6510 Cornell Avenue in Broad Ripple. Big Hat has a marvelous selection of books. It has space also here for special occasions that can be rented. Amongst the books that they have for sale here is one, a fictionalized account of a Ponzi scheme in mid-Indiana from the 1960s, titled Crime Pays That Night.
And who is the author of that, Mark?
That's me.
Okay, interesting. The show is Civil Discourse Now, and just as you can tell by the name, that it's about civil discussion of political issues. And we have a guest here today, Matt Stone, who is a candidate in District 7. First of all, for the viewers, tell us where that district is.
District 7 is a good chunk of Pike Township, and there's a bit of Wayne in there as well. I live around the border at Melbourne. Lafayette Square area falls within that district. It's basically south of 56, and I think Lafayette Road is the other border.
And so for people who are watching this who aren't familiar with Indianapolis, that's on the west side.
Yeah, it's on the northwest side of Indianapolis.
Now, Matt, you are running as a Libertarian candidate.
That is true.
And I knew your grandfather.
And he was a Republican.
Gordon Gilmer, a Northwest Side Republican.
He would have some. He would have some words to say about me running as a Libertarian candidate.
And let's talk about that. Why did you choose? Because I kind of assumed you were a Republican, like me, but you corrected me at one point and said, no, I'm a Libertarian, and now you're a Libertarian candidate. Tell me why you chose.
Well, I had a conversation a few weeks ago with a friend. I think I would probably classify myself as a libertarian if I really had to define myself as something. But I remember in 2007 there was no Republican candidate within running in the district. And even though I feel like my current representative, Maggie Lewis, has provided excellent constituent services, she works in district hard, she attends forums, she responds to emails, I feel like every candidate should be challenged, especially in the general election. I think it makes our election process work better for all of us. And that's why I primarily threw my hat into the ring. And I felt my best shot to get on the ballot and to run a campaign was with the Libertarian Party. Even though admittedly it's a small group, but it's a small group of dedicated people who are really genuine in wanting to get a group together and make a difference.
So why, you talked about being unopposed, why did you not choose to run as a Republican? Why have you chosen you said you see yourself as a libertarian.
I mean, I think I could justify my beliefs and put myself into the Democrat Party if I really had to. I might have some slightly different justifications for the issues, but I think right now I wouldn't be able to have this opportunity to run as a Republican. Not that there are Republicans out there, both elected officials and people who identify, that I greatly respect, but I don't think the powers that be within the Republican or Democrat parties would be able to support someone like me as a candidate at this time.
In other words, correct me if I'm wrong in interpreting that, you think there's too much centralized control in both parties?
I think I haven't run for office before. I'm not deeply connected with anybody, with any of the power brokers that be within the parties. I do but at the same time, I attend council meetings. I am familiar with the issues. I really try to, when I do contact counselors and stuff like that, I try to get answers and find out what's really going on. And I feel like those are the assets that really I could bring to the council. And unfortunately, I think it's easier to get the information being an outsider than an insider.
One of the similarities, I think, between yourself and myself is that we believe that the parties need to change, you take the more, I say, outsider approach. But that's not right. You're part of the
Well,
Libertarian Party.
I know what the theory is, that you fight, you either change from within, or
Right,
you go
and
from
you're
outside.
articulating that much better.
And
than I do.
historically, that's what happened. That's what's happened. You know, when the Whigs and the Anti-Federalists folded, then the Democrats or Republicans or the Anti-Federalists. You know, what happens if the third party rises? And if the third party rises, either one of the major parties absorbs their issues, or the major party crumbles and the third party becomes the primary party. And you know, with the third parties, I mean, if you look at them, the Libertarians are the only really serious party nationwide. They have ballot access in, I think, most states. You know, lots of the other parties are single issue parties. You know, Green Party's only been really interested in the environment. The Prohibition Party is only interested in alcohol laws and stuff like that. And then Libertarians are really the only party that has an organization that's focused on a variety of issues. And you know, it's going to be a slow process, even in municipal elections. You know, you're not going to see results right away. But especially in 2010, where you saw a record amount of votes go for Libertarian candidates like the Secretary of State and the Senate nominee, Rebecca St. Burris, you know, people are starting to take notice that, you know, if the Republicans or Democrats elect a crappy candidate, that they're not always going to be entitled to the votes, even from their party's base. I know several Republicans and Democrats who voted for Rebecca St. Burris last year.
Well, in this state, in order for a party to be on the ballot on a regular basis, they have to register a set percentage of votes.
In the Secretary of State's race.
Yes.
2% to 9.9% gets you minor party status. You don't hold a primary in May. You just hold a convention. 10% or above, you hold a primary in May.
But
I
according
think that might be optional, but I looked it up at one time, though I can't remember if that's true or not.
But under the Indiana statutes,
I mean, the primary, excuse me.
When I was looking at the statutes a couple of months ago, specific to elections, the way that the major party is defined in Indiana, it's restricted to two parties. I mean, you can only have two major parties. Now, it doesn't say Republican and Democrat, but it says that there are the two parties with the most votes in the Secretary of State selection. So it's like, okay, then
so even if a Libertarian Party or whatever third party gets 10%, who knows what they would be counted as a major party or whatever. I really think it's an optional. I think it's better for us right now as a party to not get above 10%, just because then not only would we be faced with having to staff pollings, and the major parties have problems staffing the polling places as it is, and we're a much smaller community. So
yeah, that's one thing that when we were working the polls a couple of years ago, I mentioned to members of the Libertarian Party I knew that it would be much more, the party would be taken much more seriously and would have much more of a deep effect on voters if they manned the polls.
I can see where that comes from, but at the same time, you know, most voters are either low information or they're deciding their votes within days or even hours of the time they cast their ballot. It can be very handy to be outside of the polling place, you know, outside the legal parameters of the polling place, and handing out flyers and talking to people, and that can be very useful in getting votes in the last few hours of an election. And when you only have so many people, when you don't have the ability to pay staffers a bunch of money.
Plus, a lot of times the people at the polls, outside the polls, are annoying you.
Well, yeah, I mean, you someone who probably knows who you're going to vote for.
You would be annoyed.
You would be annoyed. I would be annoyed because I know how my ballot's going to look. Paul probably knows how his ballot's going to look, but there are people who go to the polls who have only a vague connotation or are soft voters. Maybe they could be persuaded. You know, that's kind of what we're seeing in the national GOP debate. You know, we're seeing these flavor of the weeks. You know, rise and fall. Everyone's saying, well, Mitt Romney is really soft, but he's got 23% always, so it sounds like his support's pretty steady.
Well, no, he gets a really broad-based support because he takes so many different stands on the same issue.
Also, he looks like the guy who played the president in Independence Day. I mean, he really does.
Let's talk about the Lafayette Square area. I'm familiar with the area. One of my things I like the most is going out to ethnic restaurants. Lafayette, that particular Lafayette Road, 38th Street is just loaded with tremendous ethnic restaurants. And I heard the city come in and say, well, this is really developing as an international, we need to get involved and really make it happen. And I'm thinking, it's coming back on its own. Should we have government involved in it?
Amos Brown asked me about that when I appeared on his program. And he asked me about in the general context of, well, we're seeing all these developments and plans and stuff go on downtown. What could we do for an area like Lafayette Square?
Yeah.
And I said to him that Lafayette Square is an area that, in spite of all the effort and the money and the big PR work, goes downtown. That area has thrived despite, despite, frankly, being ignored by the city over the past several administrations and some pretty. I don't have crime statistics off the top of my head, but there's usually a few well-publicized incidents of crime every year. You know, either that police action shooting at Walmart, not several months back,
right.
During I think it was a drug bust gone bad, and stuff like that. But still, despite all that, and despite it being impossible to get through there due to all the construction, that area has thrived. And I think the best thing to do is for the city to kind of back off, or any type of governance. You know, if we need to look at zoning laws and stuff like that. I know in the area I work at, which is outside of my district, the Park 100 area by 71st and 465, there's lots of half-empty office buildings, and you know, if there's something the city could do to get some other type of businesses, maybe that's not the business that the landowner originally wanted, but you know, if someone wanted to open a bakery in a place that used to be zoned for paper pushers, you know, they should be able to do that.
I saw an article this week online that said Indianapolis has the second highest vacancy rate of any city in the United States. And I think that was talking about housing, office.
I heard on WIBC the same thing, and they kind of explained a bit more in depth. These national polls, what's the highest whatever rate, I think they're kind of misleading a bit.
Well, I know, but we do have quite a bit of vacancy, and I just am curious. I mean, we talk about developing. I look at areas and see them putting up new buildings when we have other buildings that are empty other places, and I wonder if there's some way that we can encourage use of structures we already have.
The thing with now, I'm sure I'm going to make some libertarians cringe when I say this, but there's a difference between vacant and abandoned properties. You know, if a property is being neglected, if the owner is not responding to requests to mow their lawn, to keep their property up to date and make it look good, because it's frankly a public safety issue. At some point, you know, it drags down property values around it. Petty crime, you know, teenagers get in there to party or sell or use illicit drugs. At some point, you know, it becomes an issue to the neighborhood, and frankly, I think we need to get in there quickly and not have to wait for federal grant money to kick in. And if the owner's not responding to it, we need to bulldoze the property, cut the lawn, make it look nice, and sell it, and put it back into the hands of the private market so that someone can do something constructive with it. You know, having these buildings just sit there for ages. Now, if it's a property just not being used, but the property owner is still mowing the lawn and paying the property taxes on it, you know, that's their choice. I as a counselor, would not infringe on that. But if it's being neglected, we need to either get them to take care of it, or we need to take it into our own position, make it look nice, and sell it off.
What is a priority?
We're getting close to the end of this segment, so we're going to break for just a second. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Problem for the neighborhood.
We're at the end of our first segment.
I was going to say, she's making little signals.